So for those anti-death penalty activists out there, here's a story for you reported by NPR. Department of Justice to seek death penalty for gunman in Buffalo supermarket mass shooting. The Justice Department says it will seek the death penalty for the white gunman who killed 10 African Americans in 2022 at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, in a racially motivated massacre. In a new court filing submitted Friday, federal prosecutors say that the circumstances of the crime are such that in the event of a conviction, a sentence of death is justified. This marks the first time that the Justice Department under the Biden administration has sought the death penalty in a new case. The gunman, Peyton Gendron, pleaded guilty in New York State Court last year to the May 2022 killings as the Tops supermarket in a predominantly black neighborhood at the Tops supermarket in a predominantly black neighborhood. Reading is hard. Of Buffalo. He was sentenced in November in the state case to life without parole, but Gendron still faces a federal prosecution on 27 counts of hate crimes and gun charges. Okay, so this is an interesting story because the article also goes on to say that in 2020, Biden campaigned to end the death penalty. He has not fulfilled his promise. In all fairness, his Attorney General, Merrick Garland, did issued a moratorium on federal executions in 2021. He has since, I think, given the green light for this execution, and then I think for two others that were originally authorized in the Trump administration. And I opened this up like talking about, addressing it to anti-death penalty activists because my bias is in the anti-death penalty direction. Crimes like this are horrifying. You can't even find the words to say how just terrible they are, and what scum people like that are. But I don't think that justifies putting them to death. Philosophically speaking, I'm probably not against the death penalty 100% of the time. If you look at the Adolf Eichmann trial or the Nuremberg trials, but I think in civil society we should do away with it across the board, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't deter crime. I don't know if that talking point is used much anymore, but that's been a common talking point in the history of death penalty legislation, and I think the evidence is strongly against it. Two, we often kill the wrong people, I think it's 5% of the time, or 3 to 5% of the time? Don't quote me on that. But that's enough to say, whoa, pump the brakes on this, because if you're putting innocent people to death, then you're not punishing a crime. You're participating in a new crime, masquerading as punishing another crime. That's a double whammy right there, 2 crimes. And then finally, I think we should be skeptical of giving the state that sort of power. Someone could say, oh, well, it's a monopoly on violence. The state, already has the power of life or death, blah, blah. But I don't think that gives the green light for all kinds of violence. I think, if a state, I think there are forms of violence that the state uses that aren't necessary. They're not necessary, and the death penalty is one of them. I think the majority of criminals are probably able to be rehabilitated. I think we should assume people can be rehabilitated until proven otherwise, because when you put someone to death, well, that's the end. You can't that they can't change, they can't learn, they can't be better. It's done. But with people who are alive, you can continually to try to help them become better. There's still future, in their there's still future for them, and so there's still time for change. And even if people can't change, like this gunman from Buffalo, I mean, it's quite possible this man will never be anything more than a racist piece of shit. But even with those criminals, I would say, well, you still shouldn't put them to death. Because if you're concerned at that point with like giving the monster, his or her just due, it's like, well, what's more punishing than being trapped in a prison cell for the rest of your life, having your freedoms stripped from you, and living in such a harsh environment with other, harsh environment with other difficult people with criminal histories of violence, histories of mental illness, untreated mental illness. And I mean, nobody wants to live in prison. Nobody wants to live in prison. So if that's your concern, all right, well, as I said to my mom one day, don't kill the bastards, let them rot.